you see me now?
Oh, look at you, ravishing in red. Hello,
Well,
Deana.
thank you. I'm just bring it up a little bit. Okay, now.
It's lovely to see you again, Deana. It
Thank you,
always
my
is.
dear.
Well, are you good to have a chat now?
Sure, let's do it.
Oh, fantastic. We should be here with our apple cider, shouldn't we? As an homage to your dad.
Yeah, absolutely. Martinelli's.
That's right, Martinelli's apple cider. You know, Christmas is not far away, Deana, and I guess it's that time of year when your late great father, of course, the legendary Dean Martin, comes in even louder and larger than life because you think of Christmas and you think about your dad.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It's a marshmallow world in the winter.
When the snow comes to cover the ground.
Because Christmas, that it's so Dean Martin, of course it is. And so it's amazing that he passed away on Christmas. And my grandmother, his mother, same time on Christmas 30 years before that. But Christmas it's so wonderful. We had such fabulous Christmases, at 601 Mountain Drive in Beverly Hills. I mean, we're still having great Christmases because it's a time to remember what Christmas is about.
But I mean, for me, Deana, Christmas is not Christmas without your father's festive songs playing. It's just one of those things. It's kind of almost Christmas without a tree, not to have Dean Martin in your house. Do you yourself have a favorite Christmas song of your dad's?
Well, I do love hearing him sing, It's a Marshmallow World. It does. It picks me up. But every single solitary song that he sang, all of the songs he sang, not even, Christmas songs. That voice was just so beautiful and kind and sweet. And that's who he was.
But is it kind of bittersweet this time of year? Because as you said, Deana, your dad passed away Christmas Day 28 years ago. He was 78. So does it have that kind of bittersweet feeling for you?
The whole thing is that his presence is so much, here, in our home, all of his gold albums. I have all of, I have everything, the platinum, all the music and the pictures of him. I don't know. Oh, I don't think you can see the standee I have back there of him. He's here, and the joy that he brings to everyone and to me to be able to sing those songs. So a little bittersweet, but it's all joy because he was so amazing. And, we go, oh, I miss him and I miss my grandmother and we miss all of our friends and relatives, but it's just a cheerful time. And it's just great for me.
Do you think there's some kind of Christmas connection with that? Is it just the ultimate coincidence? Or do you think, Deana, maybe there's something more to it?
Well, I just got chills when you said that because, it has to be because it was the same time in the morning, like 3:15, on Christmas. And now, I know this is a bad joke. My husband, John, he wakes me up every Christmas Eve at 3:15 to make sure I'm okay. I said, not John. And he said, come on. And that's our sense of humor. But he, it's a very special time. And it has to be, I'm still getting the chills when I think about, there they were. Christmas, Eve as Christmas Day, the same time. It's magical. So I know I'll be seeing them up in heaven.
Look, your father, Dean Martin, was larger than life in so many ways. And for 6 decades, such an extraordinary energy doesn't just vanish. Do you feel his spirit around you?
I feel his presence. And especially, if I'm singing the songs that he used to sing, all those fabulous songs. And one of my all-time favorite Dean Martin songs is I Will. I don't want to be the one to say I'm going to miss you, but I will. And it was just the way he sang it. And I just got chills again. So, there's something about me every week singing these songs on Friday afternoon. And he is with me. And as I say, I have all of his, records around me, all the gold albums, platinum albums, photographs of him. And he's there with me. I can feel him. Even if I'm doing a show out of town or something, and the minute I walk on stage and I know he's there with me. And for me to be able to sing, True Love with him and watch the video, sometimes I can hardly get through the song because that,
Yes.
that beautiful video of us, you know, together, and it's quite something. But I know he's watching over me, he's protecting me, and he makes me, you know, feel fantastic. And so when I walk out into the audience, if I'm doing That's Amore and people are singing with me, and I put the microphone and when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, and I put the microphone at them, they go, that's amore. You know, I mean, it's so cute. And he's with me, and I know it. And it's joyful for me to be able to sing these songs.
Is there one absolute sign or one thing that's happened in your life since your father's passing that you know absolutely for sure he was there with you?
Definitely when I was at Capitol Studios, when we were recording the True Love, I had my dad's chart, you know, that Cole Porter had, you know, had written of True Love that he had used. And I'm using his microphone, and Al Schmidt is in the, you know, in the booth. He's the one who put the whole thing together for me. Now, Al Schmidt he's the engineer that put together Natalie Cole and Nat King Cole's, you know, songs, you know, their duets.
Wow, unforgettable, yes.
Unforgettable. And so, you know, I was right there, and I felt my dad. I started singing, but when I would hear his voice in the headphones, I knew he was there.
You were also sitting in his chair, weren't you?
Oh yeah. Oh, I have that chair back here. I don't know if you can see it behind me.
I can, yes.
And to think about the people who sat in that chair, and for me to have it, you know, to touch it, and all the things that you know, he has given me through the years, and all the memories that people have sent to me. You know, I get so many letters and cards and comments, you know, on Facebook and YouTube and everything. It's remarkable what he did to the world. Everybody, you know, they smile when they, you know, they hear the name Dean Martin.
You know, you think about Dean Martin, you think about that music, the ease of it. And I want to talk about that in just a moment. But for years, you had an old Fabergé cologne bottle of your dad's too. So you could literally smell your dad every time you took the top off of it.
Absolutely. It's still there up in my bathroom. You know, I'll never in my dressing room. And there it is. It's getting smaller and smaller, you know, it evaporates. But you know, what a great memory for me. You know, when he would hug me and I would smell the Fabergé, you know, it was just absolutely amazing. Woodhue by Fabergé.
What was the real Dean Martin like? The man that you got to know so well?
First of all, he was very funny. He
Yes.
could make anything funny. You know, that's how he was. And he was just kind and sweet. And, you know, he'd get up in the morning and he would go play golf. And he'd be home every night for dinner. Now imagine this, 7 kids. So, you know, if each of us had one friend over, that's 14 people right there. All right. He and my mom, they would, you know, go down to the bar when Dad would come in. We would know that he would come down. He'd sit down at the bar with, you know, his little genie, and they'd have their, you know, hour together, and they'd have their little sippy poo. But I just see him walking down, you know, it was a sunken bar. And I can see him walking down because we had the Michelob on tap, and he would get his mug and he'd pour the Michelob, and then he would put it down and sit, and they would talk, you know, for a little while. And then, you know, dinner was hysterical because he would make jokes about, you know, everything. He'd pick up the salt and pepper shakers and go, they're coming around the track. They're coming around the track, you know, and everybody would, you know, you just go, where did that come from?
I know,
You know,
just so joyous by the sounds of it.
yeah, no, it was. And, you know, and we respected him so much because you didn't want to do anything bad. You know, oh, heaven, don't do anything, you know, bad. You're going to end up having to go into the den. So, oh, no, not the den. And so I'd go into the den and sit down. He'd walk in, he'd open the door, and then he'd close it behind him, you know, like the tears would already be coming down. And he'd go, don't ever be late for dinner again. Now tell your mother I was terrible and hard on you, okay? Okay. Then he'd go out and close the door. That was it. I haven't been late for dinner since that time. I was 16 years old.
Did he have something that he really loved, Deana? Was there one dish that he would just love to sit down with his family to?
He ate very well. As you notice, you know, I mean, look how, you know, he kept himself in good shape. And he would like a little pasta, you know, and chicken or lamb chop or something with vegetables and salad. But if he would go to La Familia or Da Vinci's for dinner, he would usually have the same thing, a little spaghetti with a little red sauce. But one thing that he would do that I learned from him, and I'm so grateful, he said, now, Deana, he said, when the bread comes, you're at dinners, and he said, don't eat the middle of the bread. Take the inside out of the bread, leave it on the bread plate, just eat the crust, and you'll never get fat. Thank you. Okay.
Now, tell me about his name. He was born, of course, Dino Paul Crocetti in Ohio.
Yeah.
How did
Yeah.
Deana Martin come about?
If it was now, they would have kept the name Dino Crocetti.
It's got a melody to it, doesn't
It's
it?
beautiful. Dino Paul Crocetti. Beautiful. But my brother Craig was the only one born a Crocetti, Stephen Craig Crocetti. All the rest of us, the names had been changed. But it was because in those days, it wasn't fashionable to be Italian, heaven forbid. And there was a singer called Dino Martini or something. And then they said, well, Dean Martini. And so Dean Martin stuck. And I'm glad it did.
He seemed so effortlessly breezy on stage. And I'm wondering how he achieved that, because I remember when we chatted once before, you told me that Frank Sinatra worked on his notes, on this incredible breathing technique. But yet for your dad, he just seemed to open his mouth and out it all came.
He had that beautiful voice, of course. I mean, he was blessed with that. But he worked on it, all through his life. He had it. But he had that style. He had that cool. He had it, and he didn't want to rehearse. He really did not want to do that because he thought it was more spontaneous and cuter. And that's how he was. And Uncle Frank was unbelievable. He's the one who gave me, voice lessons and things, about breathing and diaphragms and things. But, my dad just said, just make sure, Deana, you get there on time. Don't be late. Know all the letters, don't embarrass me, what your words are, and that's the way. And he said, just be yourself. And I said, well, what about voice lessons, singing lessons? He said, you want to sound like everybody else in the choir? I said, no. He said, get your own style. And then, if you need, instruction later, that's fine, but just be yourself. And he's the one who taught me you don't have to be perfect all the time. On his show, on the Dean Martin show, he said, keep the mistakes in. If something would go wrong, you'd keep it in. He said, that's okay. Let's go on. And the thing with his cue cards, it was so cute. Thinking of Christmas now, and I think about it because his crew on the Dean Martin, the best show ever,
Yes.
they would, try and mess him up a little bit. And so I remember this one time, you'll see him, he's singing, it's a Christmas show, and he's going, Leon, Leon. He said, wait a minute, turn that around. Oh, Noel, Noel. So it was, he made it fun and funny. And, and that's who he was. He was great.
Well, of course, it was Elvis Presley, I think, who dubbed him the King of Cool. What was it about your father that made him so cool? What was that cool factor thing?
Well, first of all, he dressed very well. Always looked good. And, so his suits were tailored perfectly. And he got that from my grandmother, because my grandmother, Angela, she was a seamstress, and she made sure that everybody's clothes fit perfectly. So he got that style from her. But there was just something easy about him. He was likable. He was nice. People wouldn't push him too far. He was easy. And he did have that cool thing, and it was that voice, and it was his sense of humor. And people loved him. They said, if I saw him on the street, I bet I could walk up to him and say hi. They wouldn't do that with Frank Sinatra because, it's just, they didn't have that same feeling. Frank Sinatra was unbelievable. He was my dear Uncle Frank. And what a voice, and what an actor. He was fantastic. But there was something that was so sweet about my dad that and it was cool. It was, and I can't even explain it, but he just had it.
And Elvis Presley, of course, had long said that your father was his favorite singer. That must just make you feel even prouder, if that's possible.
It absolutely does. And they recorded a lot of the same songs. And, of course, when I met, Elvis the first time when I was 9, and he told me, my dad was the king of cool, I would go see him in Vegas, through all the weight changes and everything, all the costume changes and everything. And he was just always, he was very kind. And so, of course, he was always kind and sweet to me, but he was a good guy. But the way he could sing, and he did love Dean Martin. And as I say, I think it was 22 songs they both sang.
Your father had this approachability. People felt as though they could walk up to him in the streets and say, "Hi, how are you, Dean?" Is that true? Did your father interact with fans with great ease and with a great love and respect?
First of all, he taught all of us, all of his kids, he said, treat people the way you want to be treated. He said, and then you'll never go wrong. But there was something about him that was, as I say, kind. I keep saying that, but it's hard to put to nail it down. But there was just something so amazing. And as I said, people could go up to him, but he used to go to this restaurant on Cannon Drive in Beverly Hills, and I think that one was called La Familia or La Dolce Vita. And he would have his own little bar, his own little table. You'd walk into the restaurant, the bar was on the right, and Dad's little, I guess his little place was on the left. Now people would come in, Dad would be sitting there by himself. He'd love to go to dinner by himself. He just, he was perfectly happy doing that. And people would come in, and if Joe Patty, who was the owner, if he wasn't there seating someone, my dad would look up and he'd see people standing there. He'd get up and he'd get a menu, and he'd walk. He said, "Let me show you to your table." And and people are going, "I think that's Dean Martin." He's showing us to our table. That's the way he was. But people would, they would give him his space. If they saw him, of course, people would walk over and, say, I adore you, you're fabulous. And he was kind. But they did, they respected his time.
I love the fact that your
Yeah.
father had a side hustle as a maitre d' from time to time.
There you go. He did.
I know. Look, he had this image of being this hard partying drunk. And now I know between you, me, and the gatepost, Deana, this wasn't quite true, because what was in that scotch glass when he was on stage wasn't actually scotch, was it?
Oh, Martinelli's apple cider, as I said. But you know what? And here's the thing. A lot of people, he pulled it off beautifully. I mean, that was his thing. Oh, and there's, I can't believe, he could do that. He's drunk. No, not at all. And in fact, my husband and I, we saw a couple of the impersonator shows. And I remember one day we went to a show, and John was so upset. My husband was so upset. He walked up onto the stage, took the glass out of the guy's hand. He said, "What's the matter with you?" Because the guy was, being all drunk and everything. And he said, "Don't do that." Because he had an oversized martini glass, and he was, pretend it was just being awful. Yes. And he said, "Oh." And so John took the glass away and took it down to our table. And he said, I don't ever want to see you doing that again." The poor guy who was playing Dean Martin, but he didn't realize. And my point in things like that is, younger people, when they're seeing that's who he thought he was. That's not who he was. He was a great singer, a great entertainer. And that was the shtick. That was like Jack Benny, being stingy, or, playing the violin. So
you wrote a wonderful memoir, Memories Are Made of This, that I have to say, Deana, is such a ripper read, because it brims with so many really beautiful stories from the heart. Your childhood, though, you were very candid about, it had its moments. Your mum, Betty, was your dad's first wife. She developed a drinking problem. So you were brought up by Dean's second wife, Jeannie. So, it wasn't this 100% life of sunshine. There was a lot of love, but there were those moments that all families go through, weren't there?
Oh, yes. But now things happen in your lives. There are divorces, there's marriages, there's, all of these things happen to people. There's death, there's births. But if you can handle it right, if you stop and think about it, okay. So when I was writing the book, it was hard, sitting there, and I was at the dining room table in Beverly Hills, and I had my yellow legal pad, and I'm writing down. All of a sudden, I would think, there was a memory, I go, oh, that was so awful. And so
Mm.
I'd continue writing. And, my husband would come in and say, what's the matter? I said, oh, well, Dean Paul just passed away. And so things that happen in your life, so it was my brother when my brother passed away. And so it's things that happen in your life that happen to a lot of, everybody has ups and downs in their lives. But we were brought up to not feel sorry for ourselves. None of the Dean Martin kids were little brats. And, I see now a lot of children of stars, they're so entitled, and that's not the way we were brought up. But thank you for saying that about my book. It was incredible, writing it. It was an adventure for me. And what I would do is then I interviewed all of, my dad's friends, who would see me. And when I went to see Patty Lewis, who was Jerry Lewis's, first wife, and I had my little steno pads and I would ask her questions and she would tell me things. And so all the people in my life and my dad's life, and going back to Steubenville, Ohio, and interviewing all these people, I found out a lot more information about my dad and his life and where he grew up.
It's so deliciously candid as well. You really feel as though you're there with you as you're telling these extraordinary stories. But I mean, you went to school with the likes of Tina Sinatra and Desi Arnaz and, Lucy Arnaz. So, I mean, for you, I guess showbiz was always part of the DNA, wasn't it? Right back from day dot.
Absolutely true. And I was so grateful that, that my mom, Betty, she made sure that we had, dance lessons, ballet lessons, piano lessons, whatever it was, so that we could, be the best that we could be, which is very, very nice, and that really helped me in my life. And of course, she always wanted us to get into, if there was a school play or, take music and get into sports. And so we were all very athletic to keep us, busy and to work. We all had to work. You had to work for your allowance. And I remember one thing, I'll never forget this, is when I asked my dad for my allowance early. And he said, Deana, and I'll never forget, we're standing in front of the den. We didn't go in the den, in front of the den. And he pulled out, a little wad of money that had a rubber band around it. And he took off the rubber band and because I was getting $10. And he said, now, Deana, and he took out the $10 bill and he said, Deana, I want you to remember this. I had to make $100 to give you this $10. And I thought, oh, he had to make $100 to give this to me. He said, so you have to work in your life. You've got to work all the time. Did you clean your room? Did you do your homework? Did you do all that? I said, well, yes. Okay. So we were told from an early age that we had to work for what we were going to get. And, but when he pulled out, the $10 bill and he said, I have to make $100 to give you this. I was like, well, I'll never forget that.
It puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
It does,
You referenced the late, great Jerry Lewis, and of course, he wrote the foreword to your book. Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis were the hottest comedy duo on the planet. But 10 years to the day that they officially got together, they split. What happened, Deana, from your side of things?
What happened was, my dad, and they were the greatest comedy team ever. Mm-hmm. And they were and as Jerry told me, he said, we had magic in a bottle. And that's true. They had magic in a bottle. But Jerry was he wanted to do everything. He wanted to write, direct, produce, catering, whatever it was. And it got, for my dad, it got to be too much because my dad didn't want to rehearse. He wanted, keep it light. He would write things down on a, little piece of paper, his line. And it finally, through the years with Jerry being the way he was, it finally got up to here. Mm. And, for my dad, if it got up to here, it's over. No big fight, no, nothing it's over for me. And he didn't want to speak to Jerry, really. Jerry is a genius. He was absolutely a genius at what he did, but he pushed my dad too far. And then it was, okay, it's done. And
they didn't speak for very many years. So it was quite the rift. But I know that it was your uncle Frank Sinatra, that ultimately had a hand in getting them back together.
And nobody knew that it was going to happen because we always watched the telethon. from the time, I think, well, my dad and Jerry started the telethon. Was it in 56? I can't remember what year, but we would always watch the telethon. Didn't matter if they were, split up. Jerry was always doing it. And, that tote board, so it was amazing. And I'm sitting in New York. I think I was living in New York at the time, and I'm watching the telethon, and I see Uncle Frank walk in and says, I brought someone who, likes what you do. And when I saw my dad walking out, I couldn't believe it. My jaw dropped. Oh my gosh. And then the great line, from Jerry.
So you're working?
Because my dad had the #1 TV show like for 10 years, so it was, and I got chills again because they're both probably having a good time up there right now.
Then remember, Jerry Lewis wrote that beautiful book about their lifelong friendship and what Dean Martin meant to him, which I think goes to show that the man really did have some enormous integrity. Jerry Lewis, I'm talking about, to kind of own that and to pay the respect that really he felt that your father deserved. Fascinating fact, looking back over things, you'd known Jerry Lewis as long as you'd known your dad, because he was in hospital moments after you were born, as was your father. So you'd known both men for the same amount of time, essentially.
It's true. Jerry Lewis. So when I was writing my book, and I went, of course, to interview, Jerry. So my husband and I went down to San Diego, and we went onto his boat, the Samantha, after his wife. He calls her Sam. Yeah. And so we're there, we're talking, and he said, I'm writing a book about, your dad and me. And he said, and it's called Dean and Me, a Love Story. And I went, Dean and Me, a Love Story. He said, oh, it was. He said, I just loved him so much. I said, I know you did. And you guys were great together, because they were the greatest comedy team ever.
And then you look at the other dimension to your father. He was part of the Rat Pack, with Sammy, Frank Sinatra. It could be Peter Lawford, Shirley MacLaine was part of it for a while.
I love her.
And so forth. What was the real Frank Sinatra like? The Frank that you called Uncle Frank?
He was fantastic to me, of course. He was fantastic to all, my whole family. But there was just something so down to earth about him when he was around us. And I went to school with Tina. Frankie Jr., he was a good friend too. That was my sister Gail's age, he was. And then Nancy was my sister Claudia. So we all, hung out together. But there was just something nice about, Frank Sinatra. First of all, he was Frank Sinatra, but he was Uncle Frank. And people said, well, why did you call him Uncle Frank? I said, well, because, he was like an uncle. That's what they were like to us. I wouldn't call him Frank and not Mr. S or something like that. He said, call me, Uncle Frank. And Tina, I was Uncle Dean for Tina and Nancy. So that's, it was all family. Uncle Frank, Uncle Sammy, when I wore his tuxedo and danced around the house, singing Mr. Bojangles or something, it was great. He taught me how to dance a little, and and Frank helped me, to sing, and then the sense of humor with all of them. It was great.
It's hardly a surprise then, Deana, is it really, that you would go into the biz of show? But what was your dad's initial reaction to he getting the gleaning that, here she goes, she's going to be a me?
Well, yeah, that's true. What's really funny. But he said, and the same thing with all of his kids. He wouldn't pick up the phone and call Lou Wasserman and say, put my daughter in your movie. He said, you go down and you read for the part, just, make sure you know what you're doing. You stand in line, you go to the cattle calls. I had a good agent, so, but there was this one, he would not call and pressure anyone into giving us jobs. This is one thing. He said, you have to know your profession. You have to, study. And as I say, I went to Dartington College of Arts in England, for drama. But he would encourage me, but he wouldn't, he wouldn't say, oh, no, don't do it, Deana. He said, if you want to do that, then learn everything you have to learn about it, rehearse, do what you have to do to become the best that you can.
I still have great memories of you on your father's show, the Dean Martin Show. You were a teenager singing and dancing. You'd become a regular. And there was just such a beautiful dynamic between the two of you. What was it like to work on your father's show in such close proximity?
So I was scared to death. And in fact, I think the first time I was on the show with him, and in fact, I had on my prom dress. I think that's what I was wearing. And I had my first record out. And he said, "Okay, Dina, you're great. Are you scared?" And I said, "Dad, would you believe petrified?" But he would make you feel comfortable. He would help you. And as he did with everyone, he was kind. He was kind that way.
Your father made a movie with Marilyn Monroe. In fact, it was her last movie. It was titled Something's Gotta Give. And she left us partway through. She passed away. Is this true, Deana, that the studio wanted to fire Marilyn because she was so chronically late, etc., but it was your father who said absolutely no way?
That's exactly right. He said, "Nope, if she's not in it, I'm not in it." He says, "She's fabulous. And so it's going to be all right." But that's the way my dad was. He was a friend. He was it. It wasn't just a talk. It's like the thing with Sammy Davis Jr. when he was going to marry my Brit, and it was the elections and it was Kennedy. And, my dad was pretty upset because Sammy was uninvited to the inauguration. And my dad said, "Sammy's not going, I'm not going." And he didn't.
Because Sammy was with a blonde Swede, essentially.
Yeah, there you go. And so my dad said, "No, Sammy's not going, I'm not going."
You got to know Marilyn Monroe quite well too, didn't you?
Yes, I did. In fact, I did the twist for Marilyn Monroe with my brother at 601 Mountain Drive. Dino and I did it for Marilyn Monroe, and to Bobby Darin singing "Up a Lazy River." In fact, I'm going to do that song this week. But it was quite a life, that I had. And Marilyn was kind and smart.
Marilyn Monroe dead. You think of those three words. Do you remember your father's reaction to it, knowing they'd been working together when she passed away?
He was very sad, and he said, it's terrible that happened. He said, but these things happen. And there was something very calming about him. It's like when we found out, that Kennedy had been shot, that our president, died, and we were watching that on the news and everything, and Dad was, he was a calming factor for me, and which is, he said there's a reason for everything that happens. So
I know a crushing moment in your life as a sister. I know a crushing moment in your father's life as a father. Was the plane crash death of your brother, Dean Paul Martin Jr., 1987. How do you ever come to grips with something like that?
It was very, very difficult. Captain Dean Paul Martin, he's the one who taught me how to fly. Because when we would fly to, Palm Springs, which was great. But, he loved flying, and he was very, very good. And then, of course, when I met my husband, who is a pilot, and I'm a pilot now,
Yes.
So whenever I'm in a plane, I'm always thinking of, my brother Dino, who said, and when he said, "I'm going to be in the Air National Guard," and when he said to me, he said, "Dina, don't worry, when you look up in the sky, I'll be protecting you." And so it was, we couldn't believe that his plane went missing, that it crashed, and my beautiful, fabulous brother Dino was gone. I was just, and it was, my dad. All of us. It was just, it's horrible. You can't, you can't imagine it. Yeah.
Your dad was, of course, father to 8 children, and 3 have now left us. We just talked about Captain Dean Jr., but also Claudia and Ricky, 2 have gone. What happened, Deana?
Gosh, as you go, what the heck is going on? Because Ricky, it was, such a shock. My sister Claudia, she had breast cancer. It's still a shock, but that, it was, a couple of years, that she was ill. But, with Ricky, it was overnight. Same with, with Dean Paul, just, like that. And it's just, but as I say, they're always around us, because I have all these pictures and memories and everything. This house is filled with, all the, great thoughts and, and what we used to do together. But, and Ricky was so much fun. He really was. And we would do, shows together. he had that great sense of humor. It had to be hard for him because he was, Dino's little brother. So Dean Paul was, so it was tough for Ricky, but he got out there and he learned how to sing, and he would get up and he would entertain people, and he was great. So it's just so sad. I wish he were, still here.
You know what I love from your book, Deana? Just so many wonderful, interesting nuggets. Like you danced with Jeff Bridges at one point in time.
Oh, yes. Yeah, he's my cotillion partner. And
Yeah.
we got all the awards. We were good. We were good at it. There's no denying it. So that was funny, but we worked hard.
And you dated Davy Jones of the Monkees fame, of course, before meeting the absolute love of your life.
Oh yes, my handsome husband John. And Davy was hysterical. That was great when I did the Monkees show. Yeah, I've had a lucky life, and and people who've come into my life. It's just been an amazing experience, and I'm looking forward to all the next few hundred years.
I know. Well, you married, in fact, the love of your life, John Griffith, 33 years ago. And how's this for fabulous? You met on a blind date, you two, didn't you?
Blind date on Valentine's Day. I'm not kidding. Neither of us wanted to go, but my sister talked me into it. And so she wanted me to come, and we met. Let me see. So it was in at La Familia in, in the Valley. And so, Gail talked me into it, and I said, oh, I don't want to go. She said, please, I want him to, he's a client of my husband, and it'll be good. And, you're going to like him. And of course, and I said, well, all right, now should I be, business attire? What should do you want? Sexy? What do you think? She said, oh, go sexy. So 33 years ago, so I wore a white leather mini skirt, and it was Valentine's Day, and a little red top and a red thing, and, big hair in the, that time. And, I walked in and I sat down, with Gail, and then Gus brought John in, and I thought, oh my gosh. And my sister kicked me under the table, said, he's gorgeous. I said, yeah. And we had the best time ever. So it was, and then we got married a year later.
We all love a good love story. I mentioned earlier, you've notched up some really great movie credits. Your first major Hollywood movie was Young Billy Young, with the late, great Robert Mitchum. And I got to say, somebody that makes my heart go boom, and that's Angie Dickinson. What are your memories of making that movie with those two fabulous people?
It was remarkable to sit there in that old town, doing a Western, with them was great. But Angie was so adorable. I mean, she's still, good friends, of ours, absolutely. And she was in the documentary that John and I did.
Yes.
Dean Martin, King of Cool. Yes. And she was so happy to do it. She really was, and had incredible things to say about my dad. But she was just wonderful, and she was part of that Rat Pack. And, and then we think about Shirley MacLaine and Angie Dickinson and all the guys. They were just wonderful, and they were fun to be around. So
Strangers at Sunrise is another one with George Montgomery. Yep.
Oh,
yep.
George Montgomery. And I'm trying to figure out, how could they put me with George Montgomery? I think I was 22, and he was, very old and very tall,
Yeah.
but, very nice. They had me standing on a box because he was like 6'6" or something, so it was funny, and it was fun to do it. And that was we did it in Johannesburg, and I had a great time. It was a learning experience, and he was great. So, and because I went to school with his daughter, Missy Montgomery, so it was quite something. And Paisano, the movie. So I've done some, in TV, of course, and plays. I love doing, I love being on Broadway, off Broadway. And,
of course, you've done it all from Broadway to Hollywood. You've recorded albums, hosted your own TV show.
Yes.
One of the very great cabaret performers who've worked all over the world. And I've seen you in America and seen you here in Australia, and you're absolutely wonderful. As you say, you're also a pilot. You actually fly planes, and you're an author. I got to ask you this too, with biopics all the rage, it makes total sense that Dean Martin should be given the silver screen treatment. I know for a while, Martin Scorsese had talked about one, I think, with Tom Hanks. Where are things at with a movie on your father? It's screaming to be done.
It really is. My main problem is, who could play him? And I'm still thinking, with Joe Mantegna, he wants to do, when my book came out, he called me, he said, Deana, I have to direct it. I said, what? Direct what? He said, the movie. We've got to make a movie. I have to direct it. I said, you want to play Dean Martin? He said, no, I want to direct it. So we're still, working on that, and Joe is a very good friend, of ours. And it just has to be right. The script has to be perfect because my dad deserves that. And, so we're still working on something like that. As far as Scorsese, and I don't know what they're doing, but we'd have to find the perfect Dean Martin.
And that is the tall order. Look, over COVID, you started something that has now become a tradition. US time on a Friday, you take to Facebook Live and other platforms, broadcasting live and in living color from where you are now. And you provide entertainment, joy, fabulous music for millions of people around the world.
Well, thank you. Yes. I'm going to do a Christmas show, my 196th Deana Martin Live.
Wow.
I'm doing the Valleydale Ballroom in Columbus, Ohio, with a live audience. And so just like I do here, so I'm a little nervous because I'll have the 18-piece orchestra. And I'll have, Rosario will be there, taking, the comments, because it will be live. People will have an audience and they'll be able to buy their own little sippy poos. So it's going, and so, here, even though, I do it here and it's live and we don't cut it, if I make a mistake or anything, but here I'm sitting there, I'm thinking it's going to be broadcast live. Everybody can watch it. You don't have to be at the Valleydale Ballroom to see it. It's going to come on, at 4 o'clock Eastern time, just like every Friday it does, my 196th show. So it should be very, very fun, and John will be on the music, and I'll have the Rick Brunetto Orchestra and my music director, Rick Creevy, on piano, Eddie Mena on sexy sax, and it'll be quite something. That's on the Friday show. Then Saturday, I'm doing the big Deana Martin Christmas show at the Valleydale Ballroom. And that, I'm used to those things. It'll be dinner and the show, and that's going to be a lot of fun.
And what people don't realize, Deana, although they probably do now, when they tune into you, they're also getting your dad there, because he'll be there absolutely in spirit, won't he?
Absolutely. Yes, he will. And, I feel him, with me now, but he'll be there, and it'll be a lot of fun. And it's perfect. It's a Christmas show.
Deana Martin, can I just say from my heart to yours, it is always a joy to be in your beautiful company, whether it's in person or whether by the tyranny of distance this way here on Zoom, but you really are such a treasure.
All right, my dears, thank you very much. And I'll hope to see you soon. I'll see you Friday. Tune into the show.
You.